In the Kalahari desert, a hunter can kill a giraffe, an animal weighing over a ton, with a bow so weak it could not drive an arrow through a car door. The arrow itself does almost no damage. The killing is done by a grub the size of a grain of rice, dug by hand from a meter down in the sand. That grub carries a poison so potent it can destroy 3/4 of the oxygen-carrying power in an animal's blood. In 1779, a European explorer who saw it called the source poisonous worms and had no idea what he was looking at. It would take science almost exactly 200 years to work out how it actually kills. And to this day, sand communities living only a few miles apart use different beetles, different recipes, different poisons, each tuned to their own patch of desert. This is the story of the deadliest arrow in the world and the tiny beetle behind it. This is the human wild, where the past is still alive in you. Today, how the sand bushmen turn a beetle larva into a weapon capable of killing the largest animal on the African plains. You'll see the strange logic that makes a weak bow deadlier than a strong one. You'll meet the explorers and scientists who spent 2 centuries trying to understand the poison and mostly got it wrong. You'll learn exactly what it does inside the body, why the shot is only the start of the hunt, and why this primitive weapon may be one of the clearest fingerprints of the modern human mind ever found. Start with the bow, because the bow makes no sense. A sand hunting bow is small and light, a short stave throwing a thin reed arrow. Compared to the great war bows of history, it is almost a toy. On its own, it is nearly useless against big game. Fire it at a giraffe, a kudu, or a 700-kilogram eland, and the arrow lands with barely enough force to break the skin. The animal startles and runs. By every ordinary rule of hunting, that should be the end of it. So for a long time, outsiders drew the obvious conclusion. These people simply could not hunt large animals effectively. That conclusion was exactly backwards, because the San were never asking the arrow to do the killing. The arrow isn't the weapon, it's the needle. Its entire job is to break the skin and deliver a dose of something else, which turns that feeble little bow into something far more dangerous than any war bow ever was: a syringe. And this flips the whole logic of hunting on its head. A hunter with a powerful bow needs strength and a clean, deep, killing shot. A sand hunter needs neither. He needs only to get close and prick the animal once, anywhere. A scratch will do. The force of the shot is almost irrelevant, because the force was never going to be what killed. That is why the weak bow isn't a weakness at all. It's all the bow they ever needed, provided they had the one thing that made it work. And that thing was buried, at that moment, a meter underground. It's worth pausing on how radical that trade really is. Every other hunting culture in history poured its ingenuity into the weapon itself. Longer bows, heavier draws, sharper points, sturdier spears, trying to put more force behind the strike. The San solved the same problem from the opposite end. They left the weapon almost trivially simple and poured all of their ingenuity into the ammunition, into chemistry instead of muscle. It's the difference between building a stronger gun and inventing a better bullet. And as we're about to see, their bullet was a piece of applied biology thousands of years ahead of anyone's ability to explain it. Here is the first fact almost nobody guesses right. The deadliest hunting poison in southern Africa does not come from a snake, a spider, or a scorpion. It comes from a beetle, and getting it demands a piece of ecological knowledge so precise it looks like magic. The poison comes from beetles of the genus Diamphidia, the Bushman arrow poison beetle, but not the adult beetle, which is harmless. The toxin is in the larvae and pupae, and finding them is a masterclass in reading a landscape. It starts with one specific kind of tree, a comifera, the same family that gives us frankincense and myrrh. The female beetle lays her eggs on its stems and armors them in her own hardened droppings. When the larvae hatch, They drop off the tree and burrow straight down into the sand beneath it, as deep as a full meter, where they seal themselves inside tiny cocoons of sand grains. And then they wait. They can lie dormant down there for years before pupating. Now count what the hunter has to know. The right species of tree. That the deadly thing is not on the tree, but buried beneath it. How deep to dig. How to spot a sand-crusted cocoon barely bigger than a pea. A stranger could stand under that exact tree on top of a meter of lethal cargo and never have the faintest idea. And there is a payoff hidden in that long dormancy. Because the larvae lie underground for years, the sand can dig them up almost any time. A standing year-round arsenal, always in stock beneath the right trees. In the field, researchers have photographed hunters collecting the cocoons at the drip line of a commiphora shrub and storing them by the dozen inside an ostrich eggshell, a portable magazine of poison carried in a container the desert provided. This knowledge is old, and we can put dates on our slow attempts to catch up with it. In 1779, the Finnish-born explorer Hendrik Wikar traveled the region and recorded the San using poisonous worms, the first written mention, and a total mystery to him. It took over a century more before a scientist got closer. In 1891, the botanist Hans Schintz became the first to notice that the larva was tied to that specific host plant. He shipped beetle specimens off to a French entomologist named Fermer, who in 1893 declared it a brand new species. Generations of outsiders, slowly and clumsily reverse engineering something the San had simply known and used and refined for far longer than any of them could measure. Now the dangerous part. The same substance that drops a giraffe will just as easily kill the man preparing it. And the way the San handle that is a quiet lesson in engineering safety into every step. We actually know the process in fine detail because in 2016, a team of scientists, the entomologist Caroline Chabot, working with anthropologists Megan Beetle, Robert Hitchcock and Andrea Weeks, published a landmark study in the journal Zookeys, documenting it firsthand among the Juahuansi San of Namibia. They watched it done and photographed it. Here is what it takes. The hunter breaks open a cocoon and taps out the soft larva. He then squeezes and rolls its contents out. The poison lives in the grub's body fluids and tissue. In the Chabot team's fieldwork, the hunters did this on a small, natural pallet, an old giraffe knucklebone, worn smooth, used as a mixing dish. It can take around 10 larvae to arm a single arrow. Often the hunter blends the larval paste with plant juices and his own saliva, working it into a sticky mix. The plant juice glues the poison to the arrow and sometimes adds a second toxin of its own. Different groups have different recipes. But the single cleverest decision is where the poison goes, and it is a genuine piece of safety design. The hunter does not poison the tip. He applies the poison to the shaft, just behind the arrowhead. Think about why. A hunter handles his arrows constantly, drawing them, carrying them through thorn bush, checking them. A poisoned point would be a death sentence waiting on a stray scratch. And the sources are blunt about what that death looks like. In humans, arrow poison exposure can bring nausea, muscular collapse, visual failure, coma, and ultimately respiratory paralysis. The breathing simply stops. This is not a substance you can afford to be casual with. By keeping the tip clean and loading the dose just behind it, he can handle his own weapons safely, while still guaranteeing the poison rides deep into the wound when the arrow strikes home. Many San arrows go further still. The head is built to detach and stay lodged in the animal, so even if the shaft is knocked loose, the poison stays in, and the discipline continues to the end. Once applied, the poison is often dried over hot coals to bond it to the shaft, after which a finished arrow can stay lethal for up to a year, its potency fading only slowly across the seasons. When the work is done, the hunters carry the leftover scraps far from camp and dispose of them, away from children and the community. Every one of these steps, the clean tip, the drying, the careful disposal, is a rule paid for in lives and remembered. This is not superstition. It is a safety protocol, refined across countless generations by people who understood exactly what they held in their hands. For 2 centuries, everyone assumed this had to be a nerve poison, something that shuts the body down the way a cobra's venom does. It's the natural guess, and it's wrong, which is where the science gets genuinely surprising. The toxin has a name, diamphotoxin, and when the pharmacologist C.Y. Cow and his colleagues finally put it under proper laboratory scrutiny in 1989, they found the opposite of what everyone expected. Even at high concentrations, it barely touched the nerves. It had little effect on nerve signaling, on the heart, or on the muscle and nerve junctions, a classic venom attacks. The nerve poison everyone had assumed for 200 years simply wasn't one. What it actually does is quieter and more relentless. Diamphotoxin attacks the blood. It destroys red blood cells, the cells that carry oxygen, by punching their membranes full of holes until they rupture and fail. This is called a hemolytic effect, and its power is staggering. Cow's team found it could slash an animal's hemoglobin, its oxygen-carrying capacity, by as much as 75%. The destroyed cells flood the system and overwhelm the kidneys. The animal isn't struck down. It's slowly starved of oxygen from the inside, over hours, as its own blood is dismantled. Sit with the scale of that. A single grub, one of maybe 10 smeared behind one arrowhead, carries enough toxin to wipe out 3/4 of the oxygen supply in the blood of an animal that can weigh more than a ton. A creature you could lose in the folds of your hand against the tallest animal on the continent, and the grub wins. And in the spirit of honesty, this channel runs on. The exact biochemistry has genuinely been argued over. Some studies report additional effects on the heart. Older accounts spoke loosely of paralysis. But the clearest laboratory work points hard at that massive destruction of red blood cells as the killing mechanism, which reframes the entire weapon. It doesn't strike the animal down, it unravels it from within and then makes the hunter wait. Because a slow poison rewrites everything. In most hunts, the shot is the climax. Here, it's the opening move. The poison has to be slow, and so, when the arrow strikes, the animal does not fall. It runs, which hands the hunter a second challenge that has nothing to do with poison and everything to do with skill. He now has to follow. This is where the sand's other legendary ability takes over, tracking. Having placed his single dose, the hunter must pursue that one specific wounded animal across ground crossed by 100 others, reading the trail for the story it tells, the shortening stride, the faltering gait, the small signs that the toxin is working inside. The poison and the tracking are 2 halves of one weapon. The toxin does the killing, and the tracking closes the distance. Neither works alone. And the clock depends entirely on size. These are real, documented figures. A small antelope, a duiker or steenbok, might go down in a few hours. A larger antelope can take most of a day, roughly 7 to 12 hours. And the giraffe, the animal in the title, is so enormous that the poison can take as long as 3 full days to bring it down. 3 days of tracking one animal across the Kalahari, waiting for a beetle grub dug from the sand and smeared behind an arrowhead to do what no arrow from that little bow ever could. When the end comes, there's no violent struggle. The animal's blood fails, it weakens until it can go no further. The hunter closes the last distance. The weapon, in the end, was never the bow and never really the arrow. It was a beetle, a profound reading of the land, and the patience to let chemistry finish the work. Here's a question that changes how you see everything we've just described. How long have humans been doing this? The answer reaches almost unimaginably far back, and archaeology can now put numbers on it. The oldest direct chemical evidence comes from a site called Border Cave in South Africa. There, on a small wooden applicator stick, scientists detected the molecular traces of poison and dated it to around 24,000 years ago. 24,000 years. That's a poison application tool older than the last ice age's peak, older than agriculture, older than the wheel, older than writing by some 18,000 years. And the applicator implies the whole system was already mature. You don't invent a dedicated poison stick at the beginning of an idea, and it likely goes back much further still. Researchers who study the origins of hunting technology think poisoned weapons may have appeared as far back as 60 to 70,000 years ago, arriving hand in hand with the invention of the bow and arrow itself. And there's now direct residue evidence pushing the confirmed timeline toward 60,000 years. We should be honest that the very earliest dates are still debated and hard to pin down, but the direction is clear. This is not a recent trick. It is one of the oldest chemical technologies our species possesses. And here's the detail that ties it straight back to that weak little bow from Chapter 1. Archaeologists studying these ancient arrowheads noticed something. The stone and bone points were often simply too small to kill a large animal on impact. A tip that size, fired from a modest bow, physically could not do enough damage on its own, which led them to a striking conclusion. The very smallness of ancient arrowheads is itself evidence of poison. If the point couldn't kill by force, something on it must have. In other words, the moment early humans started making tiny, delicate arrowheads, they were already relying on chemistry to do the killing. The needle and syringe logic the San still use in the Kalahari today may be tens of thousands of years old, written faintly into the size of the stone points our ancestors left behind. Step back and look at what this whole system really is, because it's far more than a hunting trick. We picture Stone Age hunters making do with crude tools, a sharpened stick, a chipped stone. Now look at what the San actually built. Out of every creature in their world, they identified the one obscure beetle whose buried young carry a lethal toxin. They worked out where it hides, how deep, and how to harvest it year-round. They devised a way to extract and apply that toxin without poisoning themselves, engineering the poison's very position on the arrow as a safety device. They learned to preserve it for a year, and they built an entire hunting method around the slow action of a chemical they couldn't see but understood completely. That is, chemistry, pharmacology, and ecology practiced as a way of life. The researchers who documented it point out something sharper still. These communities can live only short distances apart and still use different beetles, different plants, different recipes. The Chabu study alone recorded beetle poison use across many separate San groups, each tuned to its own local environment. That isn't blind imitation copied down a line. It's a living, local, experimental body of knowledge, observation, testing, and refinement passed carefully across generations because the price of error was death. And there's a deeper claim in that same research worth pausing on. The very act of putting poison on an arrow, of combining a bow, an arrow, a beetle, and a plant into one system aimed at a distant, delayed result, represents a real cognitive leap. It's a long chain of cause and effect, held entirely in the mind. If I find that tree and dig for that grub and treat this arrow, then hours or days from now, over there, that animal will die. Planning that far ahead, across so many linked steps toward an invisible future payoff, is a signature of exactly the kind of abstract thinking we consider distinctly human. The scientists who study these poisons argue they may mark one of those early cognitive shifts in human evolution. In other words, this primitive weapon isn't primitive at all. It may be a fingerprint of the modern human mind itself. That knowledge is now among the most endangered things on Earth. As the old ways fade, the people who still hold the full method, which beetle, which tree, which depth, which recipe, how to handle it, how to track afterward, grow fewer every year. The Chabu team framed their own work as a last chance to record it. When the final holders are gone, one of the most sophisticated feats of practical chemistry our species ever developed will simply vanish. So the next time someone calls a Stone Age technology primitive, picture the hunter kneeling in the red sand, digging a meter down for a grub the size of a grain of rice, and turning it into a weapon that can fell the tallest animal alive. They didn't have powerful weapons. They didn't need them. They understood their world so completely that they could reach into the ground, pull out death itself, and carry it safely on the shaft of an arrow. If you want to see more of how the last hunter-gatherers turned the human body and mind into the ultimate survival tool, there's another hunt that needs no poison at all, just a human being, an antelope, and 8 hours in the killing midday heat. And it might be the only thing more astonishing than this. This is the human wild. Until the next hunt, I'll see you out there.